Welcome to Two-Way Tonight, everybody. The day after, there's still some unknown results from the election, but the day's been dominated by the known, which is Donald Trump's shattering victory in terms of remaking American politics and setting the course for what should be the next 4 years. We'll talk about that a lot today and what implications the people are chewing it over. In the Democratic world, in the blue lands of MSNBC and CNN and the congressional wing of the party, there's still a lot of concern about what happened and how to reach consensus about how to move forward, and a lot of shock. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. The vice president, a little bit after 4 Eastern time today, came out of Howard University and conceded the election in a way that was perfectly pleasing to Mar-a-Lago. And I think she was trying to split the difference between Mar-a-Lago and her supporters. Let's roll a bit of that, please.
The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. Now, I know folks are feeling and experiencing a range of emotions right now. I get it. But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power.
All right, so that's nice. That's the way it usually works and the way we'd all want it to work. Thank you for joining. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome in. If you're watching here on the Two-Way platform, great. If you'd like to get in the conversation, including our conversation with Congressman Byron Donalds of Florida, please raise your electronic hand. And if you go into the chat, every day I get emails from people saying, why is the chat such a cesspool? Why is it so inconsistent with the ethos of peace, love, and understanding and the presumption of grace? I can't really answer that. It's an incredible psychological project. I don't know why you come on this platform and make the chat a sewer. As I've told you many times, I barely look at the chat. I see some things popping up on the Zoom chat. But please, just stay out of the chat if you're not in the spirit of what we're doing here. And then we'll talk to some other folks and we'll take your questions. And again, as always, we like new people. Even though we're on season 3, we still like news people. So please, news people, come in, raise your hand. And we love people who, no matter who they voted for. Barack Obama put out a statement about the election. And it speaks to what those of us trying to track how Democrats are viewing what happened, speaks to the lots of different points of view. Bernie Sanders put out a long statement. You saw people on MSNBC all day with a veritable Pizza Ranch buffet of different, what I would call mostly excuses about what happened, but some theories about what happened. Go ahead and put up the Barack Obama statement. This is one paragraph from what President Obama put out. As I said in the campaign trail, America has been through a lot over the last few years, from a historical pandemic and price hikes resulting from the pandemic to rapid change, and the feeling a lot of folks have that no matter how hard they work, treading water is the best they can do. Those conditions have created headwinds for Democratic incumbents around the world, and last night showed that America is not immune. That's a good, like, 80,000 feet theory about what happened, but I keep saying when people say there were going to be a struggle to win, I say 3 things. Number one, no one drafted Kamala Harris to run. She wanted to run, so presumably she knew about the headwinds. Number 2, the Harris campaign didn't seem to talk a lot about those headwinds when they were running, whatever. And number 3, if you say that's the challenge, then you ask yourself, what did Kamala Harris do to address that challenge during the campaign? I think the question answers itself. Okay. In Trump world, transition meetings, speculation about who's going to get what jobs in overdrive. The window's not that big, particularly if he wants to try to be up and running. The greatest mistake I think that presidents-elect make is they don't try to figure out how to get people confirmed quickly. and everybody goes through the same thing. The presidents get frustrated, the cabinet secretaries get frustrated, the White House chief of staff gets frustrated because they spend all this time doing personnel. And part of it is superstition and not wanting to be caught measuring the drapes, so they don't really start in earnest till now. But I guarantee you, past this prologue, even though Donald Trump says, I learned from last time, I know how to do it, they'll still be fighting to get people confirmed. Now, Senate control makes a big difference. How big that Senate control will be is up in the air because there are a lot of Senate races still not determined. And I still think they'll be in much better shape if they're above 53, so they don't have to deal with Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins having the kind of veto that Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema had. We'll see where it ends up because again, there's 3 or 4 races we still don't know. The House is still not known, but Republicans are feeling optimistic. So it looks like Donald Trump is base case more likely than not going to have unified control when he takes over. On the legal front, good news for President Trump. The belief now is that there will not be the sentencing in the New York state case in which he was convicted. So that sentencing will be delayed to presumably after he leaves office. But Tish James had another a press event where she said we're going after him full bore. So we'll see what happens there. All right. I'm going to talk to Congressman Donalds a little bit. He's a big supporter of President Trump. And he and I will talk. We'll take some questions from all 4 of the congressmen. And then we're going to bring in a few other guests and we'll talk all night for the hour, whatever's on your mind. So, Congressman, welcome in. So much I want to ask you, and people here have probably seen you a lot on cable and other television. But before we get to that, you are from Brooklyn. In
That's right.
honor of the congressman, I wore. Some people speculate the congressman might someday run for president. He will not. But I wore my "No Sleep Till Brooklyn, Iowa" T-shirt in honor of you.
That's pretty good.
Tell us, how old were you when you left Brooklyn?
I was 17. I graduated high school,
Yeah,
Nazareth High School
yeah.
in Brooklyn, and I went to college in Tallahassee.
Yeah. So you can take the man out of Brooklyn, but you can't take Brooklyn out of the man. How are you,
Never.
Brooklyn? What about you is Brooklyn still?
I mean, I keep it pretty simple, man. I think growing up in the inner city, you have to learn how to read people very quickly, not deal with BS when it comes your way, and just be as direct as you can. But you always want to be respectful because you never know what somebody else is doing or what they know. So I try to stay respectful of everybody I come across, but measure the BS as it comes. And politics is a lot of that.
Yeah.
And you just kind of work hard and make the best of it.
In your district, can you buy the New York Post at like the newsstands?
Yeah, yeah, we got a lot
Yeah,
of New Yorkers down here, so you can get
yeah.
the Post.
That's what I love about Florida. You can buy the Post anywhere. When you think of Brooklyn heroes, who are like your Brooklyn heroes? Like
Oh
celebrities,
man. I
like
mean,
music,
so I grew
sports?
up in the 90s, so for me it's Biggie, the notorious
Yeah,
B.I.G., God rest his
yeah,
soul. He
yeah,
was huge. Eric B. and Rakim. I'm a hip hop kid, so
yeah. And
growing up in the inner city.
when you think about Brooklyn restaurants or neighborhoods or landmarks, like what are like your Brooklyn places?
Man, still juniors. Last
Yeah.
time I was in the city, I almost got me cheesecake for breakfast, but I had to get going, couldn't do it.
Do you
I'm
go
getting
with the
older. I can't
classic?
eat
Do you,
cheesecake.
do you go with the
Of
classic
course,
or you get not one of the flavored
classic,
ones? Yeah,
classic.
those are ridiculous. All right. Were you at the Penn State Ohio State game?
No, I didn't
No,
go.
you weren't there. So you've gone to a lot of events for President Trump all over the country. What are some memorable moments for you that you were at from the campaign?
Oh man, the most iconic was MSG. As a city kid,
The hate fest.
to yeah, whatever. To
Yeah.
as a city kid to be in the garden and actually
Yeah.
to speak in the garden, that just personally for me was epic. The rally in the Bronx was iconic because it
Mm,
kind of demonstrated where the campaign was shifting to, that we were just going to be in every place possible.
yeah.
I saw the garbage truck come out in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I was with the president that day when the garbage truck came out.
Yeah.
It's just been a lot of really cool moments. And then last night, kind of being, with the team, watching the returns
Yeah.
as they were
How
coming in, knowing that we had it.
when and how did you meet President Trump first time?
This was back in 2019. I was in the Florida House at the time, and I presented him with an award for his work in criminal justice reform. And they wanted me to give a speech introducing the president and presenting him with the award. And, I got so excited, I forgot the Secret Service directions to go sit in the crowd, and I accidentally walked backstage, and Jared Kushner was backstage. And so they basically made me stay and wait there until the president was done. So I got a chance to see him on stage, but then talk to him in the back before Secret Service pulled him out of there.
So you never met him before he was president.
No,
Did you watch? Were you Apprentice fan?
nah, my wife was. She loves it.
Yeah,
My wife and my mother-in-law, they love The Apprentice. I would watch it every now and again.
yeah,
But
yeah.
reality TV is not really my thing.
So you don't have a single reality show that you like.
Actually, the only one that I did really like, I kind of got into for a little bit, then dropped it, was The Amazing Race.
Uh-huh.
Actually, being a member of Congress, especially during a presidential campaign, it feels like you're in the Amazing Race because it's like, how do I get from here to there? Can I
Yeah.
change planes? Is that going to work? Do I need a rental car? Is there a way I can make it all work? So I got into it for a season or two.
So people always ask me when something happens in the campaign trail, did that surprise you, or how much did that surprise you? And I'm like, nothing surprises me. I covered the Clinton campaign in '92. Like
Mhm.
nothing can surprise me. But one thing in this cycle surprised me. All right, it was when J.D. Vance expressed a passionate love for Emily in Paris. Have you ever seen that show?
Nah.
No.
So
All right.
when it came up,
Tru-
I was like, okay,
yeah.
whatever.
Trust me, that does not compute. I got to get to the bottom of that. My next JD Vance interview will be devoted about 30% because I love the show, but if I were running for vice president of anything, I wouldn't admit it. It's kind of a crappy show, and he made it seem like it was like The Sopranos. All right, let's talk a little bit about your place in the Trump constellation. You're going to stay in Congress. You're not going to take a job in the administration, right?
I don't believe so, no. I mean,
Don't
look, there's
believe
a
so.
lot of stuff swirling, but my plans are to stay
Yeah.
in the house.
What if he offered to make you secretary of something? Would you take that?
Listen, you got to evaluate everything.
Yeah. But what if he
At
said to
that
you,
point, you
Byron,
have to really.
you were such a good supporter, I'll make you secretary of anything. What would you take? You could be secretary of anything.
Oh, Treasury. Not even a
Treasury.
question.
Are
Treasury,
you,
yeah.
I know you've got a little bit of a finance background, but are you ready to step in the shoes of Steve Mnuchin and Jon Snow? He was
Yeah.
Treasury
Well, I
Secretary.
think,
Yeah.
as a country, we got to figure some
Yeah.
serious things out. First
Yeah.
is, what are some of the strategies to help stabilize the national debt, begin to pay that down in a constructive way? How we're going to manage the duration risk on the federal balance sheet right now, because the current borrowings are actually very expensive compared to some of the older T-bills that are out there. You got to figure that out. There's a couple other things they're going to have to get done. I think it's going to be really important for the next Treasury Secretary to resolve.
We've talked about the fact, and it is a fact, that neither presidential candidate talked much about debt and deficit on the campaign
Mhm.
trail. If you were president, what would be kind of the building blocks of your effort to, over time, reduce the debt
Mhm.
and deficit? Would it be spending cuts, entitlement reform, tax cuts? How would a President Donalds deal with debt and deficit?
Well, I actually think it's an all of the above strategy. Look, the reality is we have a lot of programs in the federal government that people have come to rely on. So you have to be very delicate with this process. The first part's economic growth. There's not going to be any substantial way of paying down a debt without large
Totally
scale
agree.
economic growth. The
What,
second piece
let
is
me just stop you on
discretionary
growth.
spending.
Let me
Yeah.
stop you on growth. I always get criticized when people say the U.S. can't grow at more than 2 or 3%. Do you believe the U.S. could grow at more than 3% annual?
Yeah, I do actually. It's a part of it, and a main part of it is energy production in the United States. If we are energy dominant, like the president likes to talk about, it gives you the ability to get over 3%. Second piece is the regulatory environment. We have to really shred the regulatory environment. I know people hear deregulation, they think it only favors big business, but the truth is, big business has no problem with the regulatory environment. It's actually small business which is stifled by the regulatory environment because they don't have the personnel or the legal team to navigate the labyrinth. So it kind of pigeonholes those companies. Digital assets is something that we have to resolve in the United States. That's a multi-trillion-dollar industry that can really be domiciled, if you will, in the United States with massive amounts of capital that can be raised if the United States basically just gets out of the way of that industry to thrive. And then, yes, you're going to have to deal with discretionary spending. We can't still be spending in post-COVID levels. It's just insanity. We can't handle it. And then the fifth piece of that is you can do some modest reforms in Social Security and Medicare, which can be borne out over a decade or two. And that kind of gives you the environment where you can stabilize the debt and then find ways to pay it down.
How soon, if you were president for 8 years, would you be
Mhm.
able to get to a balanced budget in those 8 years?
It's possible, but one of the problems in the federal budget is we have a bunch of these side programs that exist. Let's take the Inflation Reduction Act. There's a bunch of Green New Deal tax credits in there.
Yeah.
CBO scored it at about $296 billion, but Goldman Sachs says no, they're worth about $1.4 trillion. Well, that's stuff that is not really accounted for with the way it was scored, but it's going to have real budgetary impacts over the next decade in the United States. So you have to shape those, reframe stuff like that. And we have a lot of those little pocket programs all through the federal budget and then in side pieces that are not in core agency spending. So you have to do that. You have to trim the federal agency budgets. Find a way that we can still be proficient. The third thing is I think that blockchain technology does have some cool implications for things like USAID, stuff like that, where we can actually trim the fat, actually get help to people we're trying to help without, frankly, the money being stolen by random people around the
Yeah.
globe. I'll leave it at
I'm
that.
I'm going to start floating your name for Treasury Secretary. That seemed good. Who's the coolest Treasury Secretary in American history?
Dang, that's hard.
Yeah, they're not a cool group as a general
Nah,
matter.
no, but
All
nothing
right.
really comes to mind in terms of
All right.
cool.
All right. I'm going to ask Congressman three more questions, then open up to you. Lots of hands up again for new people. Get ready. All right, three questions. And one thing I love about you is I can ask you anything, and I know you won't get mad.
Fair.
All right, there you go. Uh, what's something about Donald Trump that you think people underappreciate, a positive aspect of his personality?
He's really genuine. He's genuine with people who have no ability to do something for him. I remember a couple years ago in my district, there was a young girl who was the daughter of a lady that my friend was dating, and she was a huge Trump fan. The girl was 12 years old at the time and wanted to meet him. So I just told her, stay with me, and I'll help you go to see him. And we go through the curtain. He sees my son, sees my wife, and he's just like, "Oh my gosh, it's great to see you guys." Pointed her out immediately. He goes, "Byron, who's this?" And I go, "Well, this is so and so." And he goes, starts talking to her. And so we took a picture. Then he kicked me and my wife and my son out the picture, took 5 pictures with this young girl. He didn't have to do that. You're in the clicks room. Nobody sees it. There's no video coverage of this. And so I always tend to value people, especially in politics, who treat people with a lot of grace and are magnanimous to them when there's
Oh,
nothing that they can do for that person. That's the
oh,
Donald Trump people don't really see.
okay. And you've got three kids, all boys, is that right?
All boys. Yeah.
All boys. What are their names and how old are they and what do they like to do with you?
Well, Damon's 21. He's in college. He graduates with a degree in economics in the spring. He's a defensive tackle at Holy Cross. Me and him, we just kind of hang out and watch sports whenever he has a chance to be home. My 17-year-old's walking around the house right now. He's a senior in high school. The biggest thing I love with him is just talking to him about his future right now. I go watch him play every chance I get. I basically through this last couple months, the only times I've really been home has been able to go watch him play. And then my youngest is 13. He's in seventh grade. And he and I go and see movies super late at night, probably around 11 o'clock at night, get a lot of popcorn, sit around and watch movies.
What genre of movies?
Action. Always
Yeah,
action if you're going to go
always
to the
action.
theaters,
And
baby.
your middle son
Always
plays
action.
plays football also?
Yeah, he's a defensive back. I don't know how he's 170 pounds because I'm like 280. I don't know where he
Yeah.
got that body from, but he's 6'2", 170, runs a 4.55 40, and he coaches looking for a corner.
Huh.
Check him out. Check him out.
What do you eat too much of that you shouldn't eat?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh man, fast food. Listen, campaign diets will do it to you.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
have been staying away from the burgers though. I've been disciplined. Staying away from the
Yeah.
burgers. Staying away from too many French fries.
Yeah. All right, last one. Keep your poker face up for this one. Ready?
Yeah.
You get an all expense paid trip to London, England, theater, restaurant, sightseeing, and you can pick one of these two people as your companion for the whole weekend, just the two of you. I'll give you the names. You have to tell me who you pick and why. Ready?
Mhm.
Ready? Liz Cheney or Matt Gaetz?
Oh, Gates.
Yeah,
Because at least I know we'll have a good time. Cheney, ooh,
not
you know,
necessarily.
yeah.
All
I
right,
don't think Liz has a lot of fun personally. Me
all
and
right,
Gates will have a good time in London.
Matt Gates is super fun.
Yeah.
He's a fun guy to be around, as they say. Dominique, welcome in. Tell folks where you are, who you voted for president, if you wish, and then your question for the future Treasury Secretary of the United States, Brooklyn in the House, Byron Donalds. Dominique,
Well, I am in Florida and have lived in Brooklyn previously, so we
you
have a
guys got a lot
little.
in common.
Yes,
Who'd you vote for president?
I voted for Trump. And my question is just looking at the numbers, the obviously Trump winning the popular vote is massive, but I'm looking at the numbers that he got this time around versus 2020 and the numbers that Joe Biden got in 2020 versus Kamala Harris this time around. I'm just curious, there's like a large disparity in the numbers. And I just want your thoughts on kind of why you think that is or where those votes are.
Well, look, I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, but it's not lost on a lot of us that Kamala Harris had what 15 million fewer votes than Joe Biden had in 2020. Um, I got questions, but I'm gonna leave that for another day. I think broadly though in this campaign, what I anticipated was going to happen was that you were going to see a lower turnout or a regression to the mean of voting in the country because the 20 election, the backdrop of that was COVID-19. So essentially, you had Americans who could do nothing except go vote. Especially if you were in a blue state, you were essentially locked down. There was no activity except being able to go vote. And so I think in part that's why the 20 election is probably an anomaly. It's one we probably won't see again.
So do you think a lot
Dominique,
of people just
yeah,
didn't?
go
Oh,
ahead,
sorry.
Byron.
I'm sorry.
A follow up to that would be, do you think a lot of people just did not vote this year, even with the write-ins and Robert Kennedy Jr. being on the ticket and Jill Stein got votes? But just curious if you think those people just maybe didn't vote for president at all.
Uh, I don't I don't want to speculate without being able to dig into that more, but I do think that where the political environment has been, I would say especially for people who would are Democrat or lean Democrat in their thinking, they didn't really feel a lot of energy to get out and vote. And so I think that's also demonstrates why she underperformed in urban areas, which is something that I felt that, I thought that the reason why Donald Trump was going to win in part was because she was going to underperform in urban corridors. That's what happened, and you move on from there.
What made you think she'd underperform urban?
They hit her for the first 2 months of the campaign. Like you can't run for president, especially in an era where it's a 24-hour news cycle and it's robust media and information outlets and not say anything. Like it's just impossible. And I think that there was an opportunity where she had a chance to really create, I would say, a solid foundation, and it never materialized because there was nothing coming from her except stuff that was overly scripted. I think I did an interview one day where I said her support is a mile wide and an inch deep. And that was actually it was the day the Dana Bash interview happened. And what you started seeing from that interview forward is that people realized that there just wasn't something enough there to trust her with the presidency.
I think it turned out to be 3/4 mile wide and maybe a half inch deep.
Fair enough.
Change the metaphor. Dominique, how do you explain to your Harris supporting friends why Donald Trump won?
I just think kind of a lot of the conversations that have gone around, they don't understand the voters. I don't think that they've took the they're emotionally charged in the conversation that I think people just feel it every day. And she didn't really speak to like actual issues. I watched recently where you asked a Harris voter, can they name one of her policies? And they really couldn't. And so I think that discouraged a lot of people. And so I think for Trump voters, it was his rhetoric. Yeah, sometimes it makes me cringe, but at the end of the day, I'm voting on policies and whose policies are aligned with my values and what I want for my life and for my family. And that was really my deciding factor. And I think a lot of people just can't get past the rhetoric to really look at the policies, because the policies are what affects me every day.
Yeah. Dominique, how'd you find out about two-way?
My husband actually watched all the time. So
Yeah.
I just
All
started
right.
hanging
Well,
out with him on the couch and got really interested.
great. Thank you for joining. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dominique.
Perry, welcome in. Tell folks where you are, who you supported for president, if they don't know, and what's on your mind, please.
Thanks for having me. I'm in Miami. I moved down here 4 years, part of the wave of people from New York that came down. I'd say, Clinton in 16, Biden in 20, Trump in this last cycle. And
Perry, I'll just say when I
Miami.
think about the 4 years, I remember after the 20 election when it appeared President Trump was going to run again, and the Biden people would say to me, "We know Joe Biden will win if it's a rematch because there's no such thing as someone who voted for Biden in 20 who would possibly vote for Donald Trump in 2024." And now there's millions of you. So before you go forward, just what caused you to abandon the Biden Harris and switch to Donald Trump? Or would you have voted for Biden if it had been Joe Biden?
No, I wouldn't have voted for Biden. I don't think I would have voted for any Democrat, quite frankly. I think, and I've seen this with all of my friends, and I think it's what you've seen in Miami-Dade and why it kind of has gone red. I think for us, it started during COVID and really seeing kind of the effects that the media has in shaping a narrative and the lengths at which they went to and the censorship elements and really just playing identity politics all along. And there's no real substantive policy that they're offering, right? And I think even with this campaign, it's just all about he's a fascist, he's lying, this, that. And, once you start to really dig in and start to see how the media manipulates a lot of the things that he says and, how they create clips and take things out of context and then misrepresent it. And then if you're just paying attention to that stuff, it's, there's no substance to that. And I think that's the thing that I look at is there's no real substance that they were offering in this election other than the other guy's a bad guy. And I think that's, pretty much dominated them for the past 10 years. So when she says turning a page, I think that's more of their own internal problem of they need to turn a page on just obsessing over this guy and actually offering something. And Congressman, I've watched you demolish a lot of people in interviews and just with facts. And there's not much of a response, and you've gone into some pretty hostile environments. So I think you represent what a lot of people here, and I know countless, I was watching with a bunch of friends, all women, mothers in their 30s and some single women, and, abortion was on the ballot here, and, you could still go two ways, right? Like you could still have a view, but I think people are worried about also their kids and, all the kind of gender identity stuff. And I'm about to become a father, and that was top of mind for me as well.
You bet. First time to become a father?
Yeah.
Learn how to swaddle before the baby is born. Do you have a question for the congressman? I'm sorry I interrupted you, but do you have a question?
No, my biggest question that, I watched the news today and I didn't see any accountability. Looking at just some snippets from Morning Joe, accusing Latinos of being racist.
Don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath.
I mean, it's ridiculous. There's zero introspection and accountability. I think Dan's the only honest Dem that I've seen in the media whatsoever. But I guess the main thing I'm curious about is are they going to actually let him govern this time? The first time around, first 2 years were just eaten up by the Russia stuff. And one of the things that made me really sick about the first Trump term was just every day felt like a reality show. The drama was just at such a crazy intensity, and you just wanted that to be done with. But then once you start to really look into it, I think the debate I have with a lot of liberals is just, is he responsible for that, or is the media responsible for that? And I imagine both are responsible for it, but it's a cycle that feeds off of each other. But, are we just going to be dominated by the media just trying to take him down still for another 4 years? Or will there be a little bit of and maybe this is for you, Mark, just this is his last 4 years, just enough of this and let's move on from the guy.
Congressman, I'd love for you to say whether you think it's not, but also add in, what could the Trump White House do to minimize the chances that this whole thing is about, not letting him govern? What could they do to contribute to making that something?
Well, I think it is a great question. I think first and foremost, it's going to be somewhat about the leadership in both chambers of Congress. Are they going to be mission minded about the agenda that President Trump campaigned on? I'm a part of that being a House member. Or is everybody going to want to try to chase their own agenda in the process? And I think one of the reasons why it was really tough in the first Trump administration was it took forever to get people appointed. And then also, at the time, Leader McConnell and Speaker Ryan, it's almost as if they were trying to teach Donald Trump the ways of Washington. Like, this is how it works. This is how you do it. I think right now the atmosphere is very different. If they don't know, they better find out real fast, whether that's House leadership or Senate leadership, that you better get on board, or you're basically going to get steamrolled. And I think that's going to be a big difference in how things operate. I think with respect to the media, I think for the White House in particular, it'll be just about sticking to uh, where we are on that day, or whatever the agenda item that's coming out, staying focused on that, and then on the staff, not taking a rabbit hole here or there. I mean, Donald Trump is Donald Trump. They're going to take his words out of context and clip it and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, as long as the White House is focused on the agenda, when things change in the country, use the border as an example. He's going to go in and reinstitute his border policies day one. That's something that people will see immediate benefit to. It may not be covered, but he's going to cover it. He's going to talk about it. And I think that in this current environment, members of the House, members of the Senate, either who do a lot of media or have followings, or the leadership themselves, will be out actually promoting that and making sure the American people are aware, which is very different from 2016 to 2024.
Perry, thank you, man. Thank you for joining. Congressman, do you expect you'll be in the majority?
I do. And I think, it's going to be probably a slight one, maybe one or two seats, potentially three, but, not anything new to me. That's
Yeah.
kind of how I've lived in the House.
Yeah. Folks, if you don't have your hand up and you want to ask a question, please do, and we'd welcome some Harris supporters. We don't
Sure,
want
of
this
course.
platform to, of course, some of your constituents are even Democrats, I bet. Just kidding. All right.
No, some of them are.
I know. All right. Nicholas, welcome in. Tell the congressman where you are, who you voted for president, what's on your mind, please.
Hi, Congressman. I actually was born in Brooklyn. I voted for the vice president.
Okay.
So obviously, today was a hard day for me and a lot of, I think, blue America. On my timeline, all I see is like this meltdown. If you supported Trump, block me, do all this. I don't prescribe to that. Because of this platform, Mark, I have been able to accept this result a lot easier. It has helped me understand Trump supporters better. So I thank you for that.
Thank
Right?
you.
And I appreciate that. And I guess my question for you, Congressman, is that I didn't appreciate what President Obama, I felt, lectured Black men in the Democratic Party about shifting our support to President Trump. I think the numbers bear out that Black men, on average, supported the vice president around the same levels that, we supported President Biden at, right? Not much mass defections, 15% maybe. Maybe you can talk about the numbers. I thought it was 12%, they said, but not in mass numbers. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I guess my question to you is, as an African American conservative, they say a lot of things about President Trump, that he is not supportive of African Americans. I've heard that he's a racist. I've heard these things about President Trump. I do prescribe to some of it. But regardless of that rhetoric, he is the president now. And I want you to speak to Black men, majority, regardless if it's 15, 20% who voted for Kamala Harris. What is President Trump going to do to improve my life as an African American man? How is he going to improve my life in terms of being able to buy a house, in terms of being able to start a family, and how do we get past this rhetoric? So I want you to try and speak to Black America. I know you're good at this. I've seen you in the Breakfast Club. I've seen you do these interviews. I see you with Angela Rye. I've seen you. So I know you're smart. I respect you. Even though I respect, we may disagree on policies. I want you to know I respect you. And so I'm trying to get these answers to tell them, my liberal friends, because I've told them, like, clearly there's something we're missing as Democrats. We have to assess the situation and learn. And I want to learn from, 51% of the country that voted, for President Trump.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Well,
Congressman.
Well, Nicholas, thanks for that. I think the first thing is that exit polling now, and we'll see how it all shakes out, is saying that Black men in particular, support for Donald Trump was around 25%, could be more, could be less, for Kamala Harris around 75%. That is a major shift from Black male support for Joe Biden, obviously for Barack Obama. One of the reasons why the numbers in the urban corridors didn't pan out for Kamala Harris. You could also lay in there Hispanic men, which some exit polls have it as high as 55%, or for
But
Donald
she held
Trump.
with Black women, though, I think. She held with Black
Yeah, I mean,
women.
I think the numbers, one set of numbers I saw yesterday were his support increased with Black women compared to where he was in 20, but Kamala Harris had 90% of Black women.
Okay.
That's kind of where I saw it, and he was around
All right.
10%. But I think, look, to the core of your question, first and foremost, Donald Trump's not a racist. He's simply not. And I think some of the points that people try to bring up, whereas Central Park Five or the issue in his building in the 70s that he was sued over, what also doesn't get talked about is that when he bought Mar-a-Lago, he desegregated it. Mar-a-Lago was a segregated country club. It didn't allow for blacks and Jews to attend. He changed that policy. There are black people who have worked in the Trump organization for years, for decades, who swear by him. People who have come into the orbit, worked with him, whether in a support structure or whatever. He's done all that stuff. So, I think in terms of the racist argument, I think when they talked about the building back in the 70s, I don't know what happened there. It wasn't fully vetted out, but now you're dealing with somebody who's the 47th president of the United States, specific to what he's going to do. When you have an economy where inflation is stabilized, where wages are also rising, that helps Black men. One of the big things when I've been in the inner city, Black men will come up to me and say, what I remember about Trump is that I was making money when he was president, and now I'm struggling. So for Black men, having a robust economy where prices are stabilized is good for you, not just for your pocket, but also helping you put money aside to build that family that you want. We do have to get interest rates under control. You can only do that with effective fiscal policy coming out of the House. Like that's out of Congress. That's going to be really, really important. But you have to have a White House who goes along with that. So that way you're not massively overspending and continuing to add to the problems of debt and deficits, which come out in interest rates, which affect home mortgages. The third thing is about energy policy. Listen, energy is in everything that we do. Even the part you need to fix your car is put on a train or on a truck to come and get it to you. So if energy prices continue to rise because we're trying to quote unquote save the planet, and that's not to demean people who believe in man-made climate change, but the reality is the solutions from the political left do not meet the economic reality today when it comes to energy and energy consumption. So we have to acknowledge that yes, you need oil and natural gas if you're going to have an effective economy to stabilize prices, to lower them in some respects. That helps Black men just like it would help anybody.
All right. Thank you, Congressman. And Nicholas, thank you for coming in. Appreciate you coming back. Congressman, do you have any policy differences of significance with Donald Trump?
Um, Not too many, actually. I think, he probably likes tariffs a little bit more than I do, but
Yeah.
other than that, but I think even if you get him into a detailed conversation on it, he acknowledges that in part it's to make sure that whatever the trade agreements we have, that those trade agreements are executed fairly on behalf of the United States. And if we go back in time with trade policy, our economy in the United States was so dominant for so long that it didn't matter if we didn't actually execute the controls on these trade policies because we were the dominant economy by far in the globe. Everybody had to do business with us. That's not as much the case anymore. There are other flourishing economies, so we can't still operate as if we're truly the only game in town. And I think that's where his stance on tariff policy does matter.
Yeah. I'm gonna propose one that I bet you disagree on. Maybe I'm wrong, which is
Sure,
he
go ahead.
seems to be flirting with restoring the deductibility of state and local taxes.
Yeah, I don't agree. I mean, in
Yeah.
Florida, we just don't agree, but we're
Yeah.
going to come to that one down the line.
Yeah. Here in New York, I should agree with him and not you, but I think it's the most ridiculous thing ever put in the tax code. It's
Well,
just
I mean, look, New York State, California, Illinois,
yeah,
stop
yeah,
taxing your people to death. If
correct,
you stop taxing your
correct,
people to death, you don't have that problem. And let
correct.
me just say this. I've been in like 30 states around the country. What I have found anecdotally, the best roads are in states that don't have high taxes. It's like oxymoronic to me because you figure with all the tax revenue, your
Yeah,
infrastructure would be in better shape, and it's simply not.
yeah. All right, I want to bring in two of our other guests tonight. I'm not sure if you know either of these folks. Neither of them's been elected to Congress, but they've elected people to Congress. Hank Morris, Democratic strategist, also lives in New York City, and Kristen Davison, who's a Republican. You probably know Kristen, I bet.
I've seen Kristen before. Pleasure meeting
Yeah,
you, sir.
and Hank. Um, Kristen and Hank. Kristen first, or Hank first, because we've already heard from a Republican, and then Kristen. Hank, what's your overview of what happened last night in the presidential in particular? What's your lesson about what that says about the mood of the country and about the strength of the two parties?
So, Mark, before I do that, since the congressman's from Brooklyn, can I give him some advice?
Yeah, he'd welcome
So, so I think I heard you answer one of Mark's earlier questions saying nothing comes to mind.
it.
Did I say that?
I think you did.
I must have
Freudian.
heard it somewhere.
Listen to the tape.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
that is verboten for
yeah.
the
In
next 20
politics,
years in American politics.
we're gonna pull the tape. We're gonna pull the tape, and we're gonna make some meme mashup of congressman saying it and the vice president saying it back and forth like a
I know
sing
I've said
song.
it in a speech on. I know I've said it in speeches the last month or so. So maybe I got to
Yeah,
get it out of my lexicon.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You got the yips on that. All right, Hank, what happened last night?
So I think the biggest thing is the context of this election. I think Joe Biden would have been the worst possible candidate we could have had, Democrats. And the vice president was probably the second worst candidate we could have had. And they were running in a context where 75% of the American people think things are going in the wrong direction. Something like 70% of people think the economy is very bad or bad. And that is a really, really tough neighborhood to campaign in if you are anywhere near the incumbent party. And I don't think they did anything to deal with that at all. And I think you could make an argument that if a different Republican had been running, and I could probably name 30 of them, this election would have been even a bigger landslide than it was. Second, and this is going forward, I think President Trump had an enormous chance to be gracious after Butler, and he was for about an hour, and then reverted to the old Donald Trump. And I think now he has a much better, bigger, more important chance to change the tone and be gracious. And I think if he does that, his numbers are going to change radically and quickly. So I think that's really important.
Okay, thank you. Kristen, what's your sort of lesson about last night? And then Congressman, I'd love you to comment on both of their critiques.
Sure.
Kristen.
Well, I think Democrats really they have a lot of discerning to do now. I don't know. I don't know if I agree that another Republican would have had a bigger win. That was a pretty big win last night, getting a trifecta and on your way to 312 electoral votes. I do think that there is Mark, you talk about it sometimes on the show that there is this, the media and Democrats, this politics of outrage, all the time. Trump saying something, CNN gets upset or MSNBC gets upset, and rinse and repeat. And Americans are just kind of tired of it. That's been the Democrat mode for the last few years, and making Americans feel bad. And I think that really, I was always curious as to why the Harris campaign was so focused on, like the Liz Cheney and January 6th and fascism. I mean, it was just so dark and despondent and not, very forward looking. She got there at the end. She was definitely, better at the end. But overall, the party is really catering to such a small group of people that I think that there's a lot of work that they have to do. But also on the flip side, even though there was a huge win last night, I think I was really happy to hear the president speak last night. He had unity themes in that speech. Hearing what he said, to Harris today, I think he is shifting and bringing that. I don't think his numbers need to improve. I think he's doing okay. But I do think those little subtle, unifying themes, I'm excited to see that continue, because I think that will bring over even some people who today are very upset that their candidate didn't win.
Congressman, what do you think of those two critiques of last night?
I think they're both important. I think first and foremost to President Trump being, I guess I would say, magnanimous and more gracious. I think he's really been, for me, having observed him now from 2016 to now, he's really been in that mode, especially post Butler. I think if you're going to say, well, he got back to being in attack mode politically, well, that's because he's competitive in nature. Like, he is a highly competitive individual, and he's old school in a lot of ways. He's going to tell you exactly what he thinks at a moment's notice. But I think if you observe him from 2015, 2016 to today, excuse me, I think what you realize is he does take more opportunity, I think, to be self-deprecating, even to laugh at himself, to be more jovial. If you come at him tough, oh, he's gonna come back at you twice as hard. I mean, we just understand that to be what it is. I think if there was, to the point about if there was any other candidate, that I don't agree with. Donald Trump has a connection with base voters in our party, but then also working class voters in our country that is not matched. It's just not matched. And I think if it was, the presidential primaries would have been very different than they turned out. That's just simply not the case. And so, and the other thing about him, I say about him all the time, like, he's one of one. It's not something you can replicate. Barack Obama, if we're going to be genuinely honest, Barack Obama was the same way, one of one. I think Democrats have struggled trying to find the next Barack Obama. They can't, because there's only one of that guy, and there's only one Donald Trump. So I don't think it's something as easy as you can just plug in another candidate and be like, "Ooh, look, we have a broader coalition." It just doesn't work that way. People connect with him the same way people connected with Barack Obama, the same way people connected with Bill Clinton, the same way people connected with Ronald Reagan. I think in terms of, the follow-up point about, ma'am, I think you were talking about where do we go from here. I'm sorry, I lost track. I got into the thing and I got off track. But I think overall, it is a political mandate, no doubt about it. It could be the beginning of a Republican realignment. And I think that's where it's incumbent on the Republican Party. Do you now take seriously in policy where the voters have come out in this election? And I think that's where the party's going to go.
Congressman, do you know what percentage of the voters in your district are Hispanic?
In my district, they're roughly 13, 14%.
And do you know what percentage of them you get?
In my district,
Yeah.
Probably easily 60-40.
Yeah. And you win by what overall?
I won by 33 points here.
Okay. Kristen,
Overall.
your option. Do you have a question for the congressman?
I'm sorry, Kristen, please follow up with your point, because I do want to respond to it. I lost track of it.
Yeah,
no. Most of the chance.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. I think you made a really great point about the Republican realignment. And I agree 100%. President Trump is a once in a generation talent that we have. What do you see, moving forward? Because, I think part of it's definitely policy, but it's also part of what I view, the attraction of Trump to bringing new people into the fold is that he goes where they are, right? He sees them, he makes them feel that he cares about them. And I think that's something as a party that we failed to do in 2012 and earlier. And he really, that was the start in 2016 when he brought, Democrat union workers to the fold, and then now making inroads with, Latinos and African Americans. And then I for all the talk about the gender gap, he did win, even though exit polls are not reliable. he did win white women in the suburbs based on the data we have so far. So how do you see that, kind of moving forward? What can we do as a party to make sure that, because there are people like, Liz Cheney is a bad example, but people who've left the party too. So how do we get them back and not just, laugh at, kicking them out, if that makes sense? What do you think is a way?
Yeah, no, what you're saying, Kristen, is super important. I think the first part is we have to learn the lesson of what the Obama team did after 2008. Like they never stopped, quote unquote, organizing. They kept the relationship building through the 12 campaign. And I think that, in our party, that's going to be critically important. Number two, for the people who you would say were, I guess, never Trumpers, and my hope is that that goes away. Um, I think there has to be an ability for them to come back into the fold, and I think that's going to be part me and other members in the party to say, you know what, you had your opinion. We're sorry that you left, but you still are a traditional Republican, a traditional conservative. We still believe the same things, even though you did not like the person at the head of the party, but there's still room for you to come home. If we can, get this stuff done and be focused on the country going forward. I think the path is there. It can happen. It's going to take, leadership from a lot of people. And I would say even more than Donald Trump. It's going to take leadership from a lot of people. JD, or excuse me, Mr. Vice President-elect, myself, Vivek, so many people, Governor DeSantis, Nikki Haley, et cetera. I think there's an opportunity there to make that happen.
Hank, question for the congressman?
Yeah, I think this is a little different. So from my point of view, 10% of the electorate or 20% of the people who voted for President-elect Trump don't like him.
Mm-hmm.
So is that something that can be fixed, that should be fixed, or does it not matter going forward? A,
Well,
and B, if it matters, how do you fix it?
Well, to be honest, I'm not sure that it matters too much because they didn't hire him because they liked him. They hired him because they know he's going to get the job done. And as long as the country is successful, I don't think they're going to be overly concerned about whether they like him or not. And I think he's in a very unique position in part because he has one term. So it's not like he's got to figure out how to put on the charm offensive for the next presidential cycle. Like this, there is not one. Maybe it'll have some impact on the midterms. And I think the way you do that is, through success, you still make sure that you're communicating effectively to the American people about what you have done and not so much about this issue or that issue. And I think if there's anything constructive that would have to be done from the next White House, I think that's what would have to be done.
Second quick question. The rule in the House of how many members can call a new election for the speaker, is that going to change or stay the same?
You're gonna be
And I know
surprised how
some
I'm
of
gonna
it
do it, though.
depends on what the margin is, obviously, but
Um, I don't know. That remains to be seen. I know next week we're going over rules for the conference. It may change, it may not change. We'll see, what the mood of the members are when we get back. But I think, being a House member, especially this last Congress, I'll tell you, I think we got into those spaces because there were members, whether they were right or wrong, and I disagreed with Kevin McCarthy being vacated. I disagreed with it. But there are members who felt that the leadership wasn't being responsive to what needed to be done, to promises made, et cetera. And so, I just think that right now we'll see what the members choose to do.
do
Not
you
sure
think
how
the
that's going
rules
to
should
work
be
out.
changed?
Yeah, I could get there. I think, if it's changed from one just to five members, five members deciding, what, this isn't working. Because I look at it, there's the factor of if five members are signing on to do it, there are probably 50 members that are thinking it. Like if there's one member that'll sign it, there are 10 members that'll thinking it.
But
It's kind of
you don't think
how it works.
25, it's one or five, not 25.
No, I don't agree with that. Simply
Okay.
because as much as I am supportive of our speakers, I don't want them to think that they're kings either. They are responsive to the members who elected them to be in leadership. And if they're not being responsive, then yes, they need to figure that out. And if they have to go, then they have to go.
And is
I
your
wanna see-
mom still a Democrat? And then I'll shut up, Mark.
Okay.
No, she switched parties because of me. Her son is smart, so she likes
Huh.
me.
I want to have a 4-minute conversation if we can, because I don't want to go over and Congressman's got to go. But Chris is a Harris supporter from Atlanta. Bill is a Harris supporter from Montana. And guys, I'd love you both to ask just a brief question of the congressman or make a comment. Again, the platform is meant to try to have reconciliation here in America. So we're trying to figure out how Harris supporters can understand what happened and not be overly upset by it, but be part of the national dialogue. So Bill, first, just either a quick comment or quick question for the congressman.
Well, the quick comment would be that a lot of Dems were saying they agreed with some of Trump's policies, but they had some issues with his character. So I think there are a lot of policies out there that Dems would love to see Trump follow through on in terms of campaign promises. And so my question is, do you think Harris supported this too? Do you think the abatement on income tax for Social Security tips and overtime, do you think that has a good chance of getting through since Harris was for it and Trump had that as a promise?
Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for that. I actually do. I joked with, sorry, I joked with the chairman of the budget committee, like, you better get to work. We got to find some money in other parts of the budget to cut. But I definitely think they could be a part of it because those are tax changes that truly benefit working families in this country and seniors who are struggling with high costs. And so I think it will be a net benefit to the economy. I definitely see it's something that can get through. The biggest question will be a handful of Democrat senators. Will they support it? Because I believe the support will be there in the House.
Chris, quick question or comment for the congressman, please.
Yeah, the quick comment is you're a pretty impressive guy. You're on the wrong side, but you're an impressive guy. And my question is this. A lot of Trump's closest advisors did not support him this time for behaviors that you would think would have been muted in a presidency of a first term when you want to get reelected. What do you say to Harris supporters who have the fear that now in a second term, when he knows he can't run again and he's just fully free to do whatever he wants without any concern, that he might do things that would even scare the people who were with him the first time?
Another great question.
I think if you talk about the people who, the people that were in the admin that decided to support Kamala Harris, in part, a lot of that was because they got fired. I mean, let's just call it what it is. In Washington, people don't like getting fired. They assume the position is theirs no matter what. And that's a problem of just what Washington has become. I've seen it firsthand. In terms of what his focus is now, I think his focus is definitely on the country and the people. And so I think I got asked by a group of donors one day, why can't we just have somebody other than Donald Trump? Because they love the policies, but they didn't want the personality anymore. And I told them, you can't have the policies without the personality. The personality is what gets you there. Because Washington abhors change. That place wants to operate the way it wants to, using special interests and people inside the Beltway to continue the thing that they've created, whether it supports the American people or not. And I think in part, that's why you see an electoral mandate for Donald Trump. He's not interested in the ways of Washington. He's interested in making sure the government's responsive to the people. I think for people who have supported Vice President Harris, who are concerned about threats to democracy, et cetera, what I will tell you is that, and I'm going to include January 6th in this. On January 20, he left the White House. He didn't have to be pulled out of there. He left of his own free will, knowing that his time was over and Joe Biden was the next president, no matter how much he disagreed with that. When it came time to securing this nation, he did that. When it came time for caring for our troops, he did that. And when it came time to upholding the rule of law, even if he didn't like the way the court answered him, if they challenged something, he did that as well. And I think every president has their own predilections about what they want to do. And a lot of stuff happens, I promise you, behind closed doors that you never hear about, and how members or even presidents talk about this stuff. But it's about the actions that actually occur, not the conversations that take place on the path to getting there.
Chris, thank you. Bill, thank you. Congressman, you going to the Lehigh Holy Cross game this weekend?
No, I'm actually going to be home. I haven't been home in about a month, so I'm going to be home this weekend before we go back to DC next week.
All right.
I love my son, though.
Yeah. All right. Is game on TV?
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it on ESPN, probably ESPN 3 or whatever it's on. I'll watch it there.
Last question, Congressman, you first, and then Hank, and then Kristen. What's something that's going to happen between now and January 20th that you think you're curious about, either how it will go, or you think it's a surprise, something that people aren't focused on? What's something during the transition?
Oh, easily. Who's gonna be the Senate leader?
Yeah.
The Senate leader is going to be everything going forward. I know it's Thune, Cornyn, and Rick Scott. Look, I'm just going to say it because I've been saying it, and I'm not afraid. I'm a huge fan of Rick Scott. He was my governor here in Florida. I served under him when I was in the state house. He knows how to get the job done, and he works hard. And so I think it's definitely going to be the Senate leader. Like I told my advice to President Trump and to his team is he should have heavy influence on who's going to be the leader in both chambers. Because if we're going to be honest, the House and the Senate do not have Republican majorities without Donald Trump. Donald Trump created those majorities, and he should weigh in on who the leadership should be.
You think he'll endorse Governor Scott, Senator Scott?
I'm not going to speak on that. I don't know, but I would recommend the president to do so.
Okay. Hank, what's something between now and the 20th you're thinking about?
I think the rules in both, and in the Senate, the filibuster, if there's anything done to eat into it a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, Kristen.
What Biden and Harris do before they leave? Is there any last minute, thing on the to-do list that they haven't been able to get done? I think we're watching that. And also, we haven't talked as much about foreign policy and, with the focus so much on this election, shockingly, but what if something happens in Israel or Iran over the next, 2 months?
Yeah. Mine is, I think President Trump's going to start conducting foreign policy with Russia and Israel during the transition, which other presidents have done, and the press will go crazy about it. But I think he's going to be ready to settle both conflicts like on Inauguration Day. Congressman, we couldn't be more grateful to you joining us. I appreciate you coming, spending an hour with us, answering all the questions, and we hope you'll come back.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm a big fan of the platform, so it's my pleasure to be on. Thanks for having me.
All right, and Hank and Kristen, thank you. Thanks everybody with questions. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time, morning meeting. Sean Spicer, Dan, and I will be here to answer all your questions and talk about what's going on. And then also, I got to tell you about one other program that's coming up. My colleague Teslin is going to have an election recap on Tap In. That is Teslin at 8 p.m. Is that tomorrow at 8 p.m.?
Is it tonight or
Tonight
tomorrow?
at 8 p.m.
Tonight.
Somebody help me out. Is that tonight or tomorrow?
Tonight.
Tonight. All right.
Tonight.
Teslin's on at 8 tonight. So log back in, go to our website and log in. And then, as always, if you want to help support Two-Way, you're welcome to make a contribution on our homepage of any amount you want. Have a great evening. Thank you, three of you, and we'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Thank you again.
Thanks, guys.